Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Rio from Polarity Fitness, where we help busy men gain muscle, lose fat, and transform their bodies by working out 2 to 3 times per week with low volume, high intensity training and flexible dieting. So over the past 7 years, I've transformed my body, and over the past 2 years, I've helped thousands of other men to do the same. So why should you take my advice when there are clearly people out there who are bigger and stronger than me? This is a question I get all the time, and I find it very funny for a couple of reasons. The first thing is that most people are unaware that 99.9% of fitness influencers and fitness authorities are blasting steroids, and what they do to build their physiques does not apply to you, because steroids radically change the process of body transformation and building muscle. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is look around your gym. Look at all the people who are emulating these mainstream bodybuilding routines, following the fitness influencer advice, training 4 to 6 days a week, doing 10 to 20 sets per muscle group. Just look at their physiques. You'll have the answer right then and there. Usually they have nothing to show for this approach. And again, that's because what these people do to build their physiques does not apply to you as a natural trainee. And the second thing is that, quite frankly, I'm very happy with the size of my physique, and I have never understood this obsession with wanting to be the biggest fucking meathead walking down the street. I really don't get it, guys. You know, so many guys get into fitness, into lifting, because they want to be more physically attractive. They want to be more attractive to women. And if you ask any girl, you know, they'll tell you the same fucking thing, which is that the bodybuilder appearance is repulsive. There's nothing attractive about it, right? So girls like a dude who's fit, who's lean, who has some good muscle mass, but is not over the top. Like, being over the top is just fucking cheesy, guys. And the truth is, you know, here's a bit of a mind fuck and a destructive mindset that has been, you know, created in the fitness industry. It's that, like, when you're natural, if you're going to be aesthetic, you're going to be at a quite low body weight. So I've been training 7 years, and right now I'm at my most aesthetic physique, and I'm only 170 pounds. And so it doesn't matter how many years of training experience you have. If you're gonna be lean and you're gonna be natural, you're going to be quite light when you look your best. And that's because, like, you just can't reach the same level of weight and size when you're natural. You cannot be massive, lean, strong, and natural. It just doesn't work like that, guys. So when you're gonna be at your most aesthetic with your shirt off, you're generally going to be very light. So drop this idea that you need to be like the biggest dude walking down the fucking street. Like, it's not going to happen unless you're taking drugs. And why the fuck would you want that? First of all, it's very unhealthy to follow that drug user lifestyle, and it's also just not a very attractive look. So the reason I've changed my workout plan recently and transitioned from training twice a week to 3 times per week is because once in a while it's nice to switch it up. And throughout my 7 years of training experience, I've spent equal amounts of time training twice a week and 3 times per week. They both work incredibly well as long as they're kept within the overall context of low volume, high intensity training. So many people get confused about whether to train twice a week or 3 times per week. It's less about that. It's more about keeping your exercise selection low, keeping the quantity of sets you're doing low, and pushing that reduced amount of training with a lot of intensity. What I will say is that I've seen my best muscle and strength gains training just twice a week because of all of the extra recovery that it lends you. And so what I've found with training 3 times per week is that there is very little room for error. So if you're going to train 3 times per week, you have to keep the workouts extremely brief. So what I've found and what I've seen with people who are training 3 times per week is that since they have more variety in terms of how to split up their training, they end up overdoing it, and they end up basically with a conventional bodybuilding routine that causes them to just overtrain and stagnate. So if you're gonna do 3 times per week training, keep the workouts very, very brief. I'm talking like 4 to 5 exercises in each workout. And that's also what I really love about twice per week training, is that it forces you to eliminate the fluff. You have to be very selective and careful with the exercises and the sets that you're doing because you don't have that many options for variety. There's not that many different ways to split up your training. So it forces you to focus on what really matters, which is dumping lots of intensity and focus into your compound exercises and focusing on progressive overload over time. So the key principles to keep in mind when designing a workout plan are first and foremost progressive overload. So progressive overload is by far the most important training principle. If you're not getting stronger over time, you are not gaining muscle, period. It's that fucking simple. So there are many reasons why people struggle to gain muscle mass, but if I had to attribute it to one main thing, it would be that most people are going through the same workouts for months on end with no attempt to increase the amount of weight that they're lifting. The second principle is simplicity. So muscle gains come from working hard on simple training routines and staying consistent over time. You don't need complex, you don't need a complex workout split. You don't need fancy exercises. You don't need fucking periodization. You don't need any of this bullshit. You need simple training routines that revolve around compound exercises and progressive overload, and you need to be patient and you need to work hard at these exercises over time. The third principle is a focus on compound exercises. So compound exercises are going to build 80 to 90% of the muscle that you're going to gain in the gym. Most people focus way too much on isolation exercises when really they're just the icing on top of the cake. They're just there to plug the gaps left by the core compound movements. The core compound movements are really going to build the substance of your physique, and then you use isolation exercises to plug the gaps and bring up weak points. Last but not least, the final training principle is low volume, high intensity training. So we do low volume, high intensity training for 2 primary reasons. The first reason is that you need to train hard to stimulate muscle growth. Training hard is what counts. The duration and quantity of the training does not fucking matter. And if you look at most people who are following high volume training routines and they're in the gym 4 to 6 days a week, they're doing 10 to 20 sets per muscle group, they're all going through the motions and they can never train hard enough to actually stimulate muscle growth. And that's because doing a lot of volume forces you to spread yourself thin. You're doing way too much stuff and you have to dilute your focus and effort, and you can never push any set or any exercise hard enough. And so that's why we do low volume training. It's to enable us to really push our training hard and stimulate a lot of muscle growth. But the second reason is that you need plenty of recovery between workouts to actually turn that stimulation into real muscle tissue, right? And most people are training way too frequently. They hit the gym on Monday and then they're back again on Tuesday, and they haven't given their bodies time to actually grow and recover. So the way I structure my workout plans when I'm working with older clients is really there are a few things that we keep in mind, a few things that are different. Most things apply, right? All of the same principles apply. The body does not change, right? Progressive overload is still progressive overload, whether you're 19 or whether you're fucking 45. All these principles still apply. It's just there's a few tips that I have found to be really helpful for my older clients, and also my dad, who is 52, and he applies the Polarity fitness philosophy. He trains twice a week. He's been seeing incredible gains, and he's stayed injury free, and he's been able to continue training consistently for over a year now without any problems. And it's because of these three tips that I helped him apply and I helped my older clients apply. First thing is being very careful with exercise selection. So when you're older, you want to be especially quick to ditch an exercise that doesn't feel good for your body. This should really go for every single person, but when you're older, injuries take a lot longer to recover from than when you're younger, right? So you have to be very, very cautious when picking exercises. You don't want to do any exercise that hurts you or hurts your joints, causes any sort of inflammation or pain. Ditch all exercises don't work well for you. Stick strictly to exercises that feel good on your body. The next thing is working in a slightly higher rep range. So all rep ranges within the muscle growth range, which is basically like 5 to 20 or 5 to 30, they all have the potential to help you build muscle, but some rep ranges beat you up more than others. So for example, the 4 to 6 rep range will beat you up a lot more than the 8 to 12 rep range. And so what I like to do with my older clients is that I like to have them work in a slightly higher rep range sometimes like 8 to 12, 8 to 15. It's a little bit easier on the joints. The next thing is rep tempo. So I'm not a fan of like 4 seconds up, 4 seconds down. I think that's actually counterproductive for building muscle, but especially when you're older, you want to do a slightly slower rep tempo and really make sure that you're in control of the weight that you're using. Again, this is something that should apply to every lifter. You always want to be in control of the weight, but you want to be especially careful when you're older when it comes to using weight that's too heavy for you. You want to make sure that you can really control the weight and perform smooth reps. So those are a few of the tips that I apply to my older clients and also to my father. So diet is obviously incredibly important when it comes to building your dream physique. However, this idea that diet is 80% of the battle when it comes to building a great body is not necessarily true. So the analogy that I like to use to explain this to someone who's newer to fitness is to picture a triangle. So on one side you have training, on the other side you have your nutrition, and then on the last side you have recovery. And so training, nutrition, and recovery are really the three big pillars of fitness. If your body is not improving, if your physique is not transforming, it's because one of those three things is being neglected or it's not on point. And the reason why it's a triangle is because it's an interdependent system. So in other words, you could have the best diet plan, you could have your diet plan on point, but if your training is fucked, then everything goes to shit. Right? And at the same time, like if your training is on point and your recovery is on point, but your diet's fucked, then the whole system goes to shit. So you never want to see one element as more important than another. You have to see it as an interdependent system, and you have to get these three things right. And really, like fitness boiled down to its core essence is literally just these three things. It's training, nutrition, and recovery. And if you have those three things dialed in, you will be seeing improvement. And whenever you're trying to diagnose what the the issue is in your fitness routine and why your body's not changing, it's always one of these three things. It's either your training, your nutrition, your recovery that's fucked. So don't give more weight to one aspect over another, because without any of these three things in place, the whole system goes to shit and you will not build muscle, you will not lose fat, you will not get the body you want. So how I eat when I'm trying to lose fat versus build muscle is actually almost identical. So the only thing that changes when it comes to trying to lose fat versus build muscle is your calorie intake. So when you're trying to build muscle, you're eating in a small calorie surplus. When you're trying to lose fat, you're eating in a calorie deficit. And that's really the only thing that changes. You're still gonna eat the same amount of protein. You're still gonna try and eat plenty of healthy foods. The only thing that changes is that calorie number. And the truth is, the difference of calories between cutting and bulking is really not that much. It's usually only like 600 to 800 calories, right? So that may seem like a lot. You may think you have a ton of wiggle room, but it's really not that much in reality. If you actually look at how much food that is in like a quantitative measure, it's really not that much. And so one sort of underrated hack to having seamless transitions between bulks and cuts, and this is actually something I get asked a lot. It's like, Rio, how do you go from like these bulks to just these cuts so quickly and you just drop body fat like that? A key reason for that is that my diet is pretty much identical and all I'm doing is shifting and changing small quantities of food. So I keep my diet structure the same, I keep the foods I'm eating the same, but I'm just pulling out and adding small quantities, right? So let's say I'm eating the same dinner meal, which I pretty much always do every single day, which is like rice or rice with steak or chicken and some broccoli, some chopped up veggies. The difference between eating that meal when I'm bulking versus cutting is maybe like a small handful of rice, right? So you're just shifting and changing these small quantities of food in order to either create a calorie surplus or create a deficit. If you change up the whole makeup of your diet plan when going from a bulk to a cut, it will seem like the transition will seem a lot more harsh and you'll be like, oh, I'm cutting. But for me, since my diet is pretty much identical, when I go from bulking to cutting, a lot of times I don't even realize it. Like sometimes I forget that I'm cutting. Like I'm eating the same diet, I'm just pulling out small quantities of food here and there in order to create that calorie deficit. So should you do lots of cardio if you're trying to look good? The answer is absolutely not. So what does looking good even mean? It means having a great body composition, and having a great body composition means having a lot of muscle mass and little body fat. And most forms of cardio are very counterproductive for both of those things. So the first thing to keep in mind is that doing lots of intense cardio tends to work up your appetite. And that is the last thing you want when you're trying to stay lean, because staying lean is about keeping your calories lower. And the easiest way to keep your calories lower is to keep your appetite lower so that you're not desiring to eat more food, right? So you can see how those two things are kind of conflicting. You don't want to be doing activity that's working up your appetite, causing you to want to eat more. And that's what happened to me when I used to do intense cardio. I used to go on runs thinking that it was good for fat loss. And yeah, I'd burn some calories, but then I'd come home and I'd be starving and I'd eat all those calories back and I'd go on this binge session, which is the last thing you want when you're trying to stay lean. And the next thing is that if you're trying to make the fastest rate of progress when it comes to building muscle and strength, you want to allocate all your adaptational reserves into your weight training. So as natural lifters, we have limited adaptational reserves. If you're doing strength training, you're doing running, you're doing high intensity interval training, you're doing a ton of different sports, it's gonna be very hard for your body to adapt effectively to any of those things because you're being spread too thin. You're going in all different directions and you're not going far enough in the direction that matters most, which is your weight training, right? If your goal is to build an aesthetic physique, you want to allocate all of those recuperative abilities, those adaptational reserves into your weight training. And this does not mean stopping doing your hobbies, right? Just last week, I went and played soccer with my friends. The key thing though is that I didn't do that because I'm like, oh, this is gonna be good for fat loss, I'm gonna burn more calories. I did that because I enjoyed it, right? And so I would strongly encourage that for you as well. If you have hobbies that require you to run or do cardio, that's completely fine, right? You wanna live your life, you wanna do the things you love, and that's one of the beauties of Polarity Fitness is that you have more time to do all those different activities that you enjoy. But my primary concern, and I would impress this upon you, is to just never do intense cardio or never do these activities in attempts to try and build a good looking body because it's not going to help. What I'd recommend doing instead is focusing on walking. So walking is the best form of cardio because it helps induce a further calorie deficit. It helps you burn calories, but without all of the negative effects of intense cardio. So it's not going to work up your appetite, and it's also not going to put a dent in your recovery ability because it's low intensity. It's not going to stress your body out too much. So I'd focus on getting 8,000 to 12,000 steps per day. So the reason why I give away all this information for free is two-sided. So on the one hand, YouTube content is my primary client acquisition method, and the whole idea there is to build trust, build goodwill with you guys, my audience, and get you guys results. Because if I can get you guys results with my free content before you even work with me, then there's a good chance that you're gonna wanna work with me in the future, because really future value is predicated on current value. So if I can get you results before you even fucking work with me, then there's a pretty good chance that you'll see me as the first option when you need help achieving your fitness goals. On the other hand, I'm just a really good fucking guy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just tugging your nuts. That's not why. The reason is because this fucking philosophy has changed my life. It's really transformed my life from being, a little fat fucking kid into who I am now. I wouldn't have been able to do it without this philosophy that I teach, and I don't like the idea of not getting it into the hands of as many people as possible. I wouldn't want to just spread this to my clients, my customers. I want to get this into the hands of everybody because truly it has had I couldn't even put it into words, the impact that this stuff has had on my life, and I really feel a deep sense of fulfillment by spreading it to as many people as I can.